Vaush, welcome back to Generational Change.
I resent the implication that I'm not a subject matter expert on this. Do you know how much drama I've been in over my opinions on this subject? My goodness.
Oh, considering how much time you spend, I can only imagine.
I think you get into so much trouble, and I still, to this day, and this is, I've told you, I don't see what the issue is. You never come off mean. You never come off hostile. I don't understand why. It's like they just cannot grasp that you might not say something they agree with.
I try not to. I've definitely had a few moments. My initial Twitch ban was actually a product of me not being able to contain my rage at the injustice inflicted on the Palestinian people by Israel. So we've been moderating the tone with which I discuss this issue a little bit as time has gone on.
Yeah, have you? Well, we got demonetized not that long ago, which was kind of sad for us because it wasn't like we were making big money, but we were at least able to have something.
I'm sorry.
And so this is what happens. But this is always one of those issues that is very, let's just say what do you call it? The algorithm is not friendly to us. It does not like the subject matter and how we cover things. But I recall you did something that was very impressive to me a while back, which was when you did like a huge fundraiser for Palestinian children. And I was very, very impressed with both your ability to raise that kind of money by playing video games for nonstop, however long that was, but just that this is your take. And I'm curious where you came to that. Because I'm tribe, so I was raised very Zionist, and it's taken me a while to get to where I am. But so I'm kind of curious, like where you came to this is obviously important to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I actually I grew up in Beverly Hills. That's my proletarian origin story. Beverly Hills, of course, is full of Persian Jews, but they're not the hyper Zionist kind of Jew for the most part because they're Persian Jews. A lot of them came over after the Iranian Revolution. And as a consequence of that, there's like a very slight cultural shift that's evident, I think, in issues relating to Israel. Most of the Jewish kids that I grew up with was because like my entire friend circle, like everyone I knew basically, Israel just didn't come up that much, not just because you only talk politics so much when you're a kid, but also because to a lot of them, it seemed like this kind of like tangential thing, like this side issue, like, oh, maybe it's fine, maybe it's not. There were only a couple of people who I remember being sort of obnoxiously Zionist while I was growing up. But I think since most of the friends that I had at the time had left-leaning inclinations, I think I just never really got a positive spin on Israel, like ever, growing up. Like it was always neutral or negative, and then you get older and you learn more about history, and then it just gets more and more negative. But I never really had that like initial sort of tainting of the well.
Yeah, that's it. My husband grew up in Southern California. He's from Hidden Hills and Jewish family, and yet he wasn't raised like I was raised here. And even among the Jewish population, and that's Ashkenazi Jews even. But like Persian Jews, I think, are they considered Sephardic Jews? Are they Mizrahi Jews? What kind of Jews are those?
They like big white pillars. That's all I know.
I don't think that's well, no, but it's interesting because a lot of people don't realize that in Israel, while people think it's about Jews, it's only about certain Jews. It's about white Ashkenazi Jews because the way they treat the Sephardic Jews and the Mizrahi Jews is terrible. And it's always been the case. So
yeah, it's a colorist regime.
White thing. Yeah. So talk a little bit about like when you realized how bad this is.
Well, a lot of it was this sort of incidental engagement with politics online, not like a big reckoning in real life. But I guess one of the things that really bothered me or that really weirded me out was there was a sort of incongruence between the progressive rhetoric that we employ in basically all situations of racial segregation and apartheid and the way stuff regarding Israel seemed to be treated. A lot of it was like the disconnect between what seems to be an almost universally held position in America, over the past decade or so. I mean, even before that, but it's like suspicion of war on terror rhetoric, right? Like any like, in order to protect the freedom of our people, we must do this, security that. Like people on the left in America are very suspicious of that rhetoric for good reason. We remember the Patriot Act. We remember what was done in the name of that rhetoric. And then you hear a ton of it, like the mainstay of it coming from Israel and all of the sacrifices and all of the sort of political posturing done with indistinguishable rhetoric. So I think I saw that, and like it was pretty clear there was a double standard going on. Going online, of course, is a really, really, really bad way to learn about anti-Zionism, because a lot of anti-Zionists are also anti-Semites, and the two like get conflated really easily. So it was difficult, I guess, trying to find the right like carved out space where you had principled critiques of Zionism that wasn't just people like pretending that AIPAC controls the US government or something.
Right. No, it's very nuanced, and depending on what your demographic is, it depends on where you're allowed to go with the conversation, almost like where it's safe to talk about the conversation. And I mean, I've been being called out by a lot of my fellow tribesmen for my position on this, is, you know, and everybody, of course, is very wanting to take sides. Everybody loves sides. They have to have teams. Everybody wants teams. And I think that really what it comes down to is I feel like I know their sort of inside propaganda tricks and how they phrase things and how they say things, because now I see it very clearly how I was brainwashed by a lot of this. But I think it's so important to disconnect Zionism from Judaism. This whole, what is going on in Israel, to me, is one of the biggest causes of anti-Semitism that we have going on right now, because this complete conflation of Judaism and Zionism, and they are not the same thing. And I think that that is something that I spend a lot of time trying to do, is deconstruct that concept, because there are more and more Jews that are waking up, especially in this country, that are not happy with what's being done in our name.
Yeah, the association between Semitism and Zionism is really, really destructive for Jewish people, I think, largely because it implicitly sort of implicates Jewish people in the crimes of the government of Israel, which is obviously not good, you know, reputationally. Obviously, like, it's not as though Arabs in the Middle East were super cool with Jews, like, historically, but things have only been made worse recently. And a lot of that is because Israel is like a geopolitical like firecracker that's been thrown in the region. A lot of that gets displaced, and because Israel is always screaming that they are representative of all Jews, you get that back and forth. And obviously, like, throughout history, every time you see like a merger of state and religion, things get really bad really quickly. We're seeing it in India with Hindu nationalism, where you have this like synthesis between Hinduism as a cultural force and like the power of Modi's government. We see this in America right now with Christian nationalism being one of the preferred dog whistles for like modern day American fascism. It's just not good. Wherever this happens, it's just not good. It's just not, it's not good politics, you know?
Right. I'm not a fan of a theocracy or an ethno-state. I'm just not. I have come to the big epiphany, which I can't believe I didn't come to it a lot sooner, that in order to have an ethno-state, you have to commit an ethno-cleanse. And those two things go together. And that is something that is like, and I have since realized that I participated in ethnic cleansing when I was, in fact, over in Israel on a trip with Alexander Muss High School in Israel, which is also partially under the JNF, Jewish National Fund, for people who don't know. And I now know that places where I was planting trees were not really meant for us to be. And I now know that I was used as a tool of ethnic cleansing.
Well, to be fair, if everyone who got brought along on birthright was marched to Nuremberg for war crime tribunals, that'd be a lot of people. That'd be a long line. I know,
and this was before birthright, right? So like, I actually haven't done birthright. The name of it actually makes my skin crawl now. I find it so unbelievable, the caucasity of it. Like, that's what I sit here and think, the absolute caucasity, your birthright. Like, how obnoxious can somebody be? And I have a son who wants to do it, but in his mind, it's just free trip to Israel. He's very practical. He doesn't care one way or the other about the politics, which is sad in and of itself. And so now I've just started calling it clan camp.
Oh, no, I had friends who were like that, yeah. Because it is a free trip, right? So like a lot of them, I had friends who were like that, and they were like, I went over there, and there were a bunch of dudes who were trying to explain to me how like, this is my homeland and my birthright, and look at this culture, look at this history, we belong here. And I was just like, yeah, okay, cool, where's the restaurants? And they just took like, they just went over there, had some burgers, and came back. Which, at that point, it's just travel on the Israeli government's dime, and that's as projects go, there are worse ones than that.
I suppose I just look at it as like brainwashing camp. And yeah, some people are resilient and are formed. Like when I was in Israel, I was 16. So I'd like to think that if I went when I was 23, I might have had a different perspective, although I don't know. I don't know. We were much more malleable. And so they like that more. They'd rather get you there younger.
I think
that's what they can work in.
I think more ethno-nationalists should do this. I think that white nationalists should have birthright, except it takes all European people to Kansas. And they like free trips to Kansas, and they're like, look at our culture, and they're like gesturing out at a cornfield or something. And they're like, here, stay, make white children. Everyone just
basically, you think we should basically colonize Kansas with all the white folk? That's kind of mean to Kansas. Don't they have indigenous people there? I mean, I would think that's kind of mean to do that.
What about Minnesota? How about South Dakota? No, wait, they definitely have.
No, I think Wyoming is where you got to go. First of all, that's the only state that I did not get a donation from when I ran for Congress. So there's that. And I think it's a Dick Cheney thing. I have this thing, and Wyoming's beautiful. It really is.
But don't you like Liz Cheney?
No, I do not care for Liz Cheney.
All right, Wyoming it is then. I just think that should be like the default ethno-nationalist position too. Like Modi's doing this with all the Indian people all around the world. Really bring it in.
And the violence abound. There's no way to do this anywhere where it doesn't end up ethnically cleansing someone else. That's my point, because it is the same thing in India, what they're doing there.
Oh, no, yeah, certainly. Just people don't usually get free vacations out of it. I think.
No,
I'm just saying.
Leave it to the Jews to know how to really work the program.
Yeah, you guys just have the money. I don't know. You get the free vacations.
Jews have all the money.
Yeah, I was curious.
Over 3,000 Palestinian civilians were killed over the weekend. I don't think they're doing a very good job of protecting the narrative as they've been able to do in previous years. I think the marches and the demonstrations that have happened over the weekend, not just in New York, but all over the country in support of freeing Palestine, has given some hope that maybe this isn't going to end in a total genocide. I hesitate to.
I don't see how it can't.
Hope.
They have no water. They have how long can the people I don't see how this can end any other way than hundreds of thousands of people dead.
Vaush, depending on obviously it's going to be a nightmare of epic proportions depending on how this unfolds. But do you see anything positive right now regarding any type of populist left movement, this anti-war sentiment that is so desperately needed right now? Obviously credit to the small faction, if you will, of the federally elected left in Congress, that particularly Cori Bush and Rashida Tlaib, who have spoken up very loudly that the president has to do something. I don't believe he will, but just the prospect of finally finding your sea legs a little bit and trying to create some type of I hate the word resistance, but that's the one that comes to mind. Do you see any silver linings right now?
I mean, the problem is that so basically no American government official gives a fuck about Jews. The Republican Party openly courts Nazis. They do not give a shit. Democrats are, I don't think every Democrat politician is anti-Semitic, but I don't think they care that much. The problem is
not their priority.
Right. It's not, the problem is that because the shadow of the Holocaust still looms heavily over the political discourse, anti-Semitism is still a pretty serious accusation. The right can say, oh, I'm racist. Well, actually, I'm just anti-woke, whatever. But that doesn't really happen as much with anti-Semitism. It's considered,
but it's not us.
Right.
How could it be him?
It's a shift in what the acceptable accusation is. And nobody wants to get called anti-Semite. The right can deal with getting called racist, which they do, but they can't deal with that. So everyone has to posture being super pro-Israel, super pro-AIPAC, which is why you see Biden trips over his dick trying to show everyone how pro-Israel he is the nanosecond the bombs start falling. And I know for a fact that quietly right now, Biden is in the Oval Office absolutely seething that this is happening under his term.
Netanyahu.
Hates him.
Furious.
Hates him. Yeah.
know.
I know for a fact that if Biden could finger snap reality into what he wants, he would stop Israel immediately. But he can't, because that would open him up to accusations of anti-Semitism from the right, and that blah, blah, blah election coming up. So it seems like the Palestinians are... I think the best case scenario here is that basically there's a mass exodus as the U.S. sends soldiers down to secure a corridor open or barters with Egypt. But even then, I don't know if that's going to happen. They opened up water down to the southern part of Gaza, which means that they
How
might
big of them?
forestall. No, I know, right? Like, yeah, and Egypt has been like horribly non-compliant this whole time. But like, I don't think there are many paths to hope in this situation.
No.
I think there are paths with less death. I am heartened by how much the world seems to be consolidating around support for Palestinian people, in spite of the fact that the media is just nonstop throating like Zionist cock, and lying to defend them. So I guess my hope would be that this is a permanent shift in the public conscious, and this does make it more politically viable in the future for American politicians to sort of distance themselves from the worst of Israel's crimes.
Yeah, I would prefer some of them to actually be doing something about it. I've said it on many shows. Every single Jewish member of Congress, shame on you. Shame on you. Not a single Jew in Congress can stand up for this. And I don't mean now, just now. I mean ever. They couldn't even stand up ever on this issue. And it's as a Jewish person, I find it embarrassing.
Vaush, what do you make of, again, we really don't like talking about her, but, Wasserman Schultz is obviously at the head of the line with the likes of Gottheimer and a few others, Jewish, of course, what a shock, who are basically saber rattling as hard as humanly possible. They do not care how many people die.
Oh, no.
And they are very much in the camp of, I had somebody who I will not say who, but somebody that, let's just say I know very well, that said, kill them all. Like, that's their attitude. Just kill them all.
I don't think there's anything fundamental about being a member of a minority group that makes you have better positions when it comes to other minority groups. The common logic would be that there's some kind of underlying solidarity that people would appeal to, but in reality, this is often not the case. In the ghettos, Latins, blacks, and Asians fight each other all the time. Like, that solidarity has to be built, but it's a willful project. I think I think that a lot of that dies when you get into politics as well. There's just very little room to criticize Israel in American government because we've made the threat of anti-Semitism such a virulent accusation when it comes to electability. Because people pearl clutch so hard, right? Like, even the lightest criticism of Israel gets met with everyone like, how dare you deny them their ability to defend their such and such? And it's all disingenuous. I don't believe any of them actually believe it. I think they just know that that's like a highly weaponizable accusation that you can throw around in Washington. So they use what they have on the table. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I guess it's pretty sickening to...
Yeah, well, I call them out as liars.
Right, to see it play out.
If you're in Congress, and I've said it before, if you have access to information and you're somebody that is in a position where you like have access to that information, which really is everybody, but not everybody takes the initiative. But anybody in Congress at this point that does not acknowledge that Israel is in violation of international law, is an occupying force, they don't acknowledge the Nakba, like anybody that's in that camp is either being willfully ignorant or they're lying about it. And they just know the truth and they're just lying about it. There is nothing else because the information is too readily available now. So there's no excuse for people that are doing that, especially in Congress. Are you willfully ignorant or lying? See, in my congresswoman's, I believe she's lying.
Oh, no, it's for sure lying. There definitely is like an overlying hysteria with regards to some people's fear of, I don't know, Palestine somehow wiping Israel off the map or whatever. There are people who like genuinely believe that shit, but I don't think they're the politicians. I think those are just like the Facebook moms who just share any bullshit they see online and are freaked out constantly over. God.
I have so much family in that category right now. It's so unfortunate. It's like you can't engage in a discussion with people that believe a mythology versus history. So you can't have a reasonable discussion with people when you're not coming at it from the same facts, and they do not acknowledge facts. So it's sort of like getting in a debate with a flat earther or a creationist. It's you're not, there's no point.
Well, we've had some pretty some pretty viral posts that were put out, particularly on Instagram the other day, alluding to what's been going on. And one thing you'll see from those who are Zionist is eventually they'll let the veil slip and they'll basically reveal that this is all of religious indoctrination. This is not, the opinion is not through reason, it's through emotion. And when that happens, you throw out all of the logic of, is this right or wrong? Well, I don't care if it's right or wrong. I care if it's what matters to me. And that's where the big disconnect is. And I think that that's what happens across the board. But this particular issue is very serious because there could be hundreds of thousands of people dead in a very short
I
span
don't
of
see
time.
how it's not going to happen. Even if they can get out, all you're talking about is setting people up in mass refugee camps that are going to be fraught with disease and like, it's just a matter of how slow the death is for people. You know, it's not, are you getting bombs dropped on you, but it's, oh, can you suitably raise a family in a desert without access to utilities? That's basically what we're talking about. So even in like, what's their best case scenario? I'm like beside myself. This is like, I know I'm like, just, you know,
the best case,
we're going to get you for Christmas. We're going to get you one of those Manscaped grooming kits. I'm getting you one of those grooming kits, man.
The best case scenario is not politically viable right now. The best case scenario is a shift in political viability. That's like the only that's what's on the table right now, which is nothing, which is suffering. I think a lot of this takes place in the context of the post 9/11 attitude that we have towards Muslim people, which is that a lot of people, not just Zionists, but just Americans and people in the West broadly, think that Muslims are subhuman. In America, it's mostly a project of like post 9/11 fear-mongering. In Europe, Western Europe, it's more recent because of the Syrian refugee crisis, where every government in Europe shifted to the right for fear of migrants who did nothing, who like you had like a year where Germany took in like 170,000 migrants and the crime rate went down that year, you know, like just complete nonsense. But that's how people vote, on nonsense. People love nonsense. So like as a consequence of all of that, right, a lot of people just think that like Palestinians are animals, Hamas are just the more violent of the animals, and all the other countries in the area are just animalistic. You know, you have Lebanon, you have Iran, you have Iraq, and they're just you know, they're like a lesser people. And then you have Israel, a Western ally. And as long as people think that, as long as people believe that, basically anything Israel does is going to be justified in common discourse, because, you know, once you have sort of innately dehumanized the opposition, you have a lot more moral leeway. You're protecting something a lot more precious, you know. And that has to shift. Unfortunately, there just aren't that many Muslims here in America, like proportional to the population, which means that we don't have the same like cultural shift. There are Muslims and they're in the cities and such, but there aren't enough of them that it's leading to this like broad shift in people's experiential perspective on Muslims. And for that reason, I think, you know, the attitude hasn't shifted as much as it could otherwise. You know what? Best case scenario, a corridor to Egypt, they flee to America, Palestinians enter all major American cities, and they end up sort of culturally ingratiating themselves and making people more pro-Palestinian just through adjacency. Like how we used to be racist against Italians, but now like every American has a little bit of Italian inside of them because we're a one people.
So basically, we need to feed people good Palestinian food, and then entice them over to the culture. Well, I have a friend that's Palestinian, and so I do know that their culture is unbelievably cool and amazing.
I would say,
and there's a lot of layers.
We need
to
kebab.
It.
Yes, we need.
Well, I mean,
kebab.
we're just not taught that. Jews, we were really taught that Arabs hated us, and that they wanted to kill us, and that they just like we were really taught, and we were definitely taught that they were lesser, that they were less civilized, that we were taught that. And I don't mean me directly by my parents. My parents are pretty much as cool as you could possibly get for, you know, a boomer person. So I wasn't like specifically sat down and taught that, but that was the sentiment growing up in the second largest Jewish ghetto in the country in the 70s. And so that's what we were taught.
With little counter evidence offered, apparently.
Right. Yeah. I said you're not an expert on this.
The interesting thing that I think is important to note here, though, and if there is any silver lining to anything that Trump brings to the table, is that if you look at DeSantis and Haley in particular, who are, I mean, look, Lindsey Graham isn't running for president. He clearly would be number one, but the two most Zionistic warmongering assholes that could possibly be running for president of the United States right now, they're not it's not working to the extent that I think they were hoping that it would. For them to be so full-throatedly, we have to do this for Israel and we have to, take the fight to the Palestinians. I'm not getting the sense that that's where like the GOP energy is. Like they're not going along with this shit. And I'm kind of cautiously optimistic that maybe we are turning a corner. Obviously, it's going to be devastating for the Palestinians, but I'm getting this impression that we're not as war hungry as we once were, especially compared to what it felt like when I was, I was 19 at the time when we were about to go into Iraq, and I felt my fellow college students around me were like, yeah, we have to go into Iraq. I don't get the impression that that's sort of the same energy at this point right now. I think we may have turned a corner in that regard.
Yeah, we're pretty isolationist leaning now. The American appetite for like boots on the ground in another country is basically zero. So that's good, at least. A lot of it is probably because the attack from Hamas wasn't on us. So, there's not that like gigantic irrational wellspring of bloodlust, which the Palestinian people are currently experiencing, from Israel. But our involvement here is like pretty limited, right? We've sent over 2 carrier strike groups because we want to threaten Hezbollah into not getting involved, project strength to Iran. And it seems that about 2,000 U.S. troops have been earmarked for potential deployment in a advisory and medic roles, like not soldiers, which is fine. I think that having U.S. soldiers over there, if nothing else, will put more scrutiny on the IDF, because I feel like those motherfuckers are doing war crimes like every nanosecond the camera's not on them, because they do it all the time when the camera's on them. So I feel like when the camera's not on them, they're doing even worse shit. Maybe having U.S. soldiers over there in an advisory and like medic capacity will make them behave better, because I don't know, I just feel like it'd be more difficult for the IDF to get away with that, like adjacent to some like random US, like some just 22-year-old from Iowa. I don't think is going to like stand there gleefully while the IDF does war crimes. At least they're less likely to. So I don't know. Maybe the scrutiny will be good. Could be wrong.
I would definitely agree with that. I wanted to let you know that I actually was in Philadelphia. I was just in New Jersey recently. I was in Philly for RFK's official announcement that he was running as an independent.
Oh, base.
I actually do think he's going to be a threat.
He got a press pass.
Yeah, I got a press pass. I got to meet a lot of interesting people, including somebody who was, I'm not going to say who it is, but was there and is a rabid anti-vaxxer and was proud to say that he was, and my kids aren't vaxxed. I'm like, that. Okay, man.
Great, nice.
I didn't know that that's a badge of honor that you need
apparently
to wear,
in that group it is.
Oh, yeah, at an RFK rally? For sure.
Yeah,
you would be. Well, that's the thing. You see, you got to go to these things to really get, gauge like where the audience is really at. And what I will say, because I was able to be at the rally and then I was able to be inside this private, meet and greet event afterwards. And I would say that you definitely have more of the pro-business conservative type, but it was a mix. Like it was definitely a mix of a lot of different people. You didn't really have the sort of anti-vaxxer crowd. You had a lot of Zionists in there, I will tell you that. You definitely got a lot of those guys in there.
Because he said up Rabbi Shmuley's ass.
Rabbi Shmuley was the person who more or less introduced it prior to the rally really beginning.
Gross.
What I will say, though, is that I think RFK is going to garner a lot of support, a lot more than people think. But his take, particularly on this issue of Israel-Palestine, is so bad. It's probably even worse than Trump or Biden, if that's even possible. And I don't take RFK to be a dumb guy. I think he's very smart.
So then what's with that? He's not getting money from AIPAC.
So what do you perceive as his strategy here?
Well, what's his take on the issue?
Israel could do nothing wrong. They are a benevolent nation, and we must have them strategically in the Middle East.
He's just full on Israel talking points.
No, it's
no
almost,
nuance, nothing.
But here's the rub, Vaush, more than anything else. The biggest thing that he said, which to me is a non-starter if anybody's being objective, and you got to push your people that you support. You can't be like, oh no, well my guy's going to lose. No, he specifically said that Gaza is not under occupation. He used those exact words.
See, that's a problem.
And when you talk like that, I'm sorry, but that's a non-starter.
I think
for anybody.
I think RFK Jr. first and foremost, is a lunatic. He might be a smart guy, but I think he's also a lunatic. I think another big problem for him is that he was pretty clearly inserted as like a dark horse wedge candidate intended to discontent Biden voters. Like, he was so obviously placed there in the DNC running to pull people away from Biden, and he kind of failed because he's crazy. And now he's running as an independent. I think he's going to pull more people from the right than from the left, so he might actually end up helping Biden. So, like, I think the problem is that, like, this might be an uncharitable characterization, but judging from what I've seen online, a lot of the people who like RFK are Nazis. They took a take that he had with regards to COVID being a bioweapon that doesn't target Jewish people.
Right,
And and they ran with that along with some other very conspiracy heavy stuff that he believes in, because Nazis love conspiracies. That's like one of their main things. So I think the problem is that like the super far right community is kind of split on Israel, because there are the fascists who love Israel, because Israel is like a borderline fascist country. Netanyahu is objectively a fascist, you know.
Oh no, and his people around him, the two that are like the one who sounds like the Gestapo,
like
and we're
Ben
turning off
Gvir.
the water,
Yeah, they're like full on,
oh, for
like
sure. Oh yeah.
Yeah, full on fascists. So the far right likes them, but the Nazis, of course, tend not to like Israel because, you know, the Jews. So I think that like there's a big split there.
What to do with that?
Seriously, yeah. How do you toe that line? You actually see right now Trump is struggling with this, because there were groups of the super ultra far right who didn't like Trump being so openly pro-Israel back when he was president, and now he's been doing this wishy-washy shit where he's like criticizing Netanyahu, but he's still saying he's like pro-Israel or whatever. And I think it kind of reveals like the further right you go, the more you have to choose what kind of far right you want to be, and the more you have to choose, the worse of a big tent far right coalition you can maintain. And that's one of the big like harming elements of Israel when it comes to like the far right. They have a difficult time keeping consistent with that. So
yeah, well, you have to balance the Nazis with the evangelicals, because the evangelicals, they friggin' love Israel. Like, they can't get enough of Israel.
Well,
now, they don't give a crap about Jews. Jews just need to all be there in order for the rapture or whatever it is that happens. I don't know.
Well, the evangelicals are begging for the end.
Right. So you've got those. So when you're in the right, and I think that ultimately when Trump moved the embassy and he was really getting into it, I think that's what he was doing. He's courting the evangelicals. And so, you know, yeah, he's got some interesting combinations of people, but the majority of his people are not those people. They're regular people.
Yeah, the same is true. Like I said, from my observation, the whole RFK crowd was very much a hodgepodge. There was a lot of different people and a lot of different walks of life. But the one thing that I think is working in his favor, and rightfully so, is that people are really fed up with this system. They're fed up with it so much that it's almost like they really they just want to overlook everything to just say, well, this is different, so I'll go with this. And that's why right now he's polling at almost 20%. And Trump and Biden are basically polling at like 38% each. But when your choices are so poor, I mean, at some point you just got to wonder, you know, what's gonna be that sort of breaking point. I mean, I'm not out here advocating for RFK in any way, but you know, I want there to be some semblance of a shift within the system, much like when we're talking about a shift in the disposition regarding Israel and Palestine.
I think
people are getting desperate.
No, I agree. I think a large part of the support that he's getting is name recognition. I mean, his voice is a political non-starter just to begin with. Just totally superficial, leaving aside all of his crazy-ass politics. Like, that on its own is enough to disqualify him. Which is kind of sad, but, you know, it's also true. I think, like, it is kind of a testament to people's desire for, like, real populist candidacy. Donald Trump is inauthentically populist, but at least he reps the rhetoric, whereas Biden is as not populist as you can really get. He is very institutional. And there are a lot of Democrat and independent voters who are not happy with that and are kind of begrudgingly going with him, which is unfortunate. Obviously, Biden is far, far, far better than Donald Trump, so, you know, it's still worth advocating for him over Donald Trump. But the DNC is not going to be able to win future elections unless they shift on this, especially because young people are the most aggressively left-leaning bloc and also the most populist bloc. So the more that becomes like the dominant decider for elections, you know, like young millennials, Gen Z, even Gen Alpha, the more important it'll be to cater to that need for a populist representative voice.
I just don't think if you have no energy, you cannot win. And that is really the thing about Joe.
I don't see how he's going
He's
to win
also
again.
showing his age constantly, especially in this moment where you really need a leader who can just speak up and forcefully say that this cannot be tolerated. The way that he came out and said we're unequivocally with Israel, the way that he also came out and said I saw the pictures of the decapitated babies. It's like at some point you got to say this is not doing our country any good. And no matter how loud we scream from the rooftops, Joe, you're going to lose.
You're going to lose.
So please, for the love of God, step aside. He's not going to do it. And whether that's because he doesn't want to step aside or because the establishment, which depends on him for their careers, for the money, are basically telling him, we'll inject you with whatever we have to inject you with in order to get you through whatever TV interviews and debates that we're going to have to do. But to suggest that one can run for president without going around the country and holding rallies and meeting people, especially in places like Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, Arizona, I don't see that happening. I can't wrap my head around that notion. But I also think that the longer they wait, the longer it reaches that point of no return where now you really are stuck with Joe and you just got to hope and pray that it doesn't completely blow up in your face.
Well, we're definitely stuck now. If there was going to be another viable candidate for the Democrat primaries, they would have had to have been introduced and like meaningfully running over a year ago. Biden, incumbent candidates obviously have the advantage. It's considered kind of an insult to try to primary an incumbent. It's considered a sign of weakness. Biden obviously is not the strongest candidate we could have, so in a way that would be warranted, but we're kind of committed now. I think that Biden has a decent shot of winning, but a lot of it depends on how this Israel-Palestine shit plays out. It's kind of grim to talk about like the genocide of 2 million people and their ethnic displacement in the context of electoral favorability. Like, how will this influence the numbers, But
right, no, but they're looking at that.
But yeah, no, it is relevant, unfortunately, And so like Biden's probably terrified of losing like a single point to people who are upset over his perceived lack of support for Israel. So that's probably motivating a lot of his ass kissing here, I guess. I think that absent everything else, if you take away the uncertainty of this particular conflict and just look at the numbers now, I think Biden has a pretty decent chance, mostly because Donald Trump is getting increasingly harrowed by the ongoing legal troubles. He can't afford to pay his lawyers. He has like a huge civil case coming up against him. He's had like his business licenses taken away. He's got like all this shit. Is like apparently even the GOP is getting bankrupted by it. Like the GOP has been allotting a portion of their national treasury to covering some of his legal costs, which is like, holy shit. Like, my man is under so much pressure that he's not only bankrupted himself, he's going to bankrupt the party. And if that keeps happening, like if these trends continue, I don't think that Trump will be able to win. I mean, assuming he's even able to at that point, I think it's just going to take too much from him. He's been stammering a lot lately too, like getting weirder and weirder. The cognitive decline will catch up with him eventually as well.
Both of them.
No, excuse me.
Both of them. It's like a race to the bottom.
You totally don't know what you're talking about.
I have
sound of mind. I'm totally the smartest, most stable genius you've ever heard. Don't ever accuse me of being like Sleepy Joe. Believe me when I tell you, we're sharp.
You're old.
And we are going to make America great again.
How excited are you guys for the upcoming presidential debates? Like two 80-year-olds. Come on, it's going to be great. It's going to be fantastic.
Just throw your diapers at each other. At least then they get people talking.
I don't watch debates because they're not real debates. It's just theater, and it's not interesting to me, and it's stupid. If bring the legal women voters back and have actual debates, I might consider getting back into that. But.
What would you have wanted to see in terms of? I mean, if we're being completely objectively neutral and just going based on any of, let's say, the governors that are out there right now. Was there anybody in particular that you think would have been a suitable, sort of like Jerry Ford type situation here, where you can essentially have somebody step in for 24 and kind of, reshuffle the deck after the fact?
Yeah, the big poll a lot of people say is Gavin Newsom, but Gavin Newsom. I'm not
their hope, though. I think that's their hope.
If Newsom lost the Vaush vote, then he's in big trouble.
Yeah. For me personally, it would have been Whitmer. If Whitmer could have gotten the ball rolling like a year and a half ago, I think that she has the politics, the poise, the passion. I think that she could make like a pretty formidable potential, but that would have been if things had gotten started before. If she just like flew in right now, like that would be,
Right.
you know, maybe in 2028. I don't know. The field does feel like it's pretty stacked. I am hopeful about 2028 because regardless of what happens in 2024, assuming we still have a country and a democracy to return to, the Republicans will not be able to replace Trump. There's too much of a cult of personality. There's going to be like a black hole of personality when Trump.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
like
a dive.
no one can. He was a flash in the pan, and he stuck around longer than we expected. Sure, but look what they did with DeSantis. They tried to like groom this guy into being the next Republican lead, and what happens? He's a freak, and he sucks shit, and he loses, and everyone hates him. And I think like it shows they have no idea how to do Trump 2.0. So there are viable Democrats for 2028. But after Trump ages out or gets arrested or, you know, whatever, he can't run in 2028, assuming he's not dictator.
Right. Like, well, no, he couldn't anyway. I mean, how old would he be? I mean,
yeah, no, he's like, this can't keep going on, right? But what are Republicans going to do after him? Like, really, what are they going to do?
DeSantis is not the answer, you know, and I am someone who has personally lost bodily autonomy here in Florida. We've been out nonstop, like every weekend, canvassing we have a ballot initiative that we're trying to get on the ballot to get our, you know, bodily autonomy back. But even with that, and even if it passes, we're going to be more than a year in Florida. Right now, we're under a 6-week abortion ban. And for more than a year. And the amount of damage that's going to do is huge.
Oh, huge shift of women over to the Dems, by the way. Great of Republicans to give that super, super easy, like, Dems have been campaigning on they're going to take abortion away for decades. Now Dems can campaign on they took away abortion. Much more effective emotionally. So
yeah, no, for sure it is. But, you know, I think that when you look at states, when people choose, they're choosing their right to choose. Unfortunately, in Florida, we also have that 60% barrier that we have to hit in doing a ballot initiative. We already lost our 50.1% rights a while ago. It's amazing how people will vote for that. It's like they're literally saying, would you like it to be harder for your opinion to count? And people are like, yes, why I certainly do. I want my vote to be count less.
Yeah. We're
sad here in Florida.
We're in one of those tough spots, but I will say that DeSantis's decision to pass the 6-week abortion ban is basically what blew up his presidential aspirations in so many ways, in spectacular fashion. I mean, I thought he was tracking for the White House, but his decision, and probably even not his own, something that somebody advised him to do, ultimately has turned everything on its head, because you look at all these states when they're having the opportunity, the reddest of red states, Montana, Kansas, Ohio, Kentucky.
They reject it.
They reject it. They still vote red, but when given the opportunity to vote on a ballot initiative, even when they try to convolute it in such a dirty, tactical way like they did in Ohio, they still see through it and they say, nope, civil liberties, bodily autonomy, right to choose.
It's really, it's hopeful in a lot of ways, because it's a reminder that no matter how skewed the political framing gets, it's just really difficult to convince people to give up their rights. It just is. Like, no matter how, like, this is one of the reasons why Republicans are so overtly racist, but all the racism they do against, like, say, I don't know, Black Americans has to be in this really abstract economic way. Like, they're in favor of charter schools and they oppose this kind of urban renewal. Like, their policies are meant to capture racial animus, but people just don't respond well to overt taking away people's rights, and they did it with women. And as a consequence of that, like, it's, you know, it's like the dog chasing the car, right? They got there. Congratulations. There's no way to euphemize your way around an abortion ban. People know when they do or don't have that right, and now it's really obvious to a lot of previously more or less apolitical people that, like, you know, last year their daughter, you know, could have gotten an abortion, but now their daughter's knocked up at 17 and can't. And it is very easy to know who to blame for that. It's not abstract like inflation. It's not this big complicated system. There was one guy with a big red button that said "F over your life," and he pressed it. So, yeah, I'm hopeful for the future as long as we don't lose our democracy in 2024. That's my ruling going forward. I think there's good room to move here as long as that doesn't happen.
I feel like we lost it. I feel like it's been, I mean, we have such problems. And the biggest one is that we don't have a Labor Party when it comes to electoral politics. We don't have a Labor Party. And as a result, you've got like nobody really leading any sort of populist movement. So electoral politics from the perspective of any sort of populism seems kind of like, it's just not, that's not where it's happening. And fortunately, we're seeing really good things happening in labor, and really nice, support for labor that I feel somewhat, inspired by that. But until we have a Labor Party, it's hard for me. Because I don't, and can you please clarify? We had somebody in the chat saying that somehow you're a Fed and you work for the Fed. Why? Where did these things come from?
Well, I've been found out. Oh, shit.
Yeah, but guys, if he were a Fed, he wouldn't want to come on my show. Why would you come on my show?
Well, to keep you on there, keep you in check. Keep an eye
Vaush
on you.
can't keep me in check. Nobody can keep me in check.
There's a lot of I'm actually doing this call so I can trace your location. We're getting the feed through now. Now I get a lot of shit because sometimes the stuff that I say is people interpret it as being a lot more institutionalist than a populist lefty should be. I think a lot of my takes are, I mean, everyone says this, right? So, like, I'm not unique for saying this, but I believe a lot of my takes are motivated by realism, basically. So, like, the idea of what can we actually do and in what ways are we limited? A lot of people want, like, progressive power, populist power, this, that, the other. And I agree, but we can't just snap that into existence. There's a process. We build the staircase, we build the ladder to get there. And the process of building that ladder is really unsavory because any actual engagement with politics, with like the process of politics and gaining power means doing stuff that feels kind of really cucked. Like Bernie Sanders endorsing Hillary Clinton and then Joe Biden were both, in my opinion, very politically necessary and smart decisions because not having done so would have cemented a narrative of him being a detraction from Democrat power over Republicans. But it also feels really cucky to watch Bernie Sanders, a really cool guy, endorse Hillary Clinton, who's not a really cool guy.
No,
not even a little.
No, look what you've done. Look what you've done.
So if you're going to bring up my name,
that.
I just have to come on here and let you know that we appreciate all of the wonderful things. Jen, good to see you.
Hi, Bernie.
All the wonderful things that you have done to try to inspire all of these wonderful people that are watching your live stream right now. I know there's you got a pretty big audience. Congratulations, you do a good job.
Thank you.
I did not want to endorse Hillary Clinton, but one thing I have to come on here and say, and it's very important, we have to talk about this. When we talk about what has happened to the elections in the United States of America, we cannot deny what happened in the 2016 Democratic primary.
I donated both times. I was part of the solution, okay? Not the problem.
Thank you.
But we definitely have to understand that if we're going to save democracy here in America, and it's hanging on by a thread, we have to eliminate superdelegates. We have to have an honest electoral process. And we have to make sure that people understand that you can have fair and free elections, ranked choice voting, same-day registration, and frankly, why not just have open primaries across the board? I'm an independent. I think I have the right to say that. But in the meantime, great to see you. You're doing a wonderful job. Jen,
it's been a delight to see you. I haven't seen you since we met at that Tacoma rally back in 2020.
It was great to see you there, and I'm still fighting the good fight. And remember, Palestinian lives are just as important as Israeli lives. Don't ever forget that, and stick in the fight, each and every one of you. Have a good night.
Well, we're getting a comment. You might want to.
Got Bernie in your studio. Holy shit.
Isn't that cool? Yeah. I always say we're small but mighty. We're small but mighty. So I wanted to ask you something totally not political. Is that cool?
Yeah, sure. Hit it.
Is that okay? Okay.
Yeah.
So you've before referenced that you're on the spectrum. And I have a son that is not, but was thought to be, like, he's got a whole host of other issues, and a lot of his friends are on the spectrum. So I'm ingrained in that. How do you feel like that affects you now? How do you feel like that affects you now in terms of like dealing with people and like not just interpersonal, but especially being somebody online? And I think to me, sometimes when I see people accusing you of things, I wonder if there's any sort of connection between their interpretation and you being on the spectrum. Like, I'm just curious.
I try not to attribute too much to it. Like, I make a lot of jokes about being autistic. I mean, I am autistic. The jokes aren't that I am or I'm not. It's jokes with that being the subject, because it can be easy, I think, to like overanalyze one's behavior and attribute too many things. It's kind of like how nowadays, like if you ask your average like college freshman about why they are what they are, there's like a million intersecting modes of analysis they'll go to, whether it be like their star sign or their horoscope, or like whether they're an introvert or an extrovert, or like what autistic, ADHD, whatever. But I think like people are people. It's always complicated. I think one of the things that I've struggled with when it comes to directly engaging with other people is that other people are willing to make, at least from what my perspective would be, so many concessions for the sake of getting along with other people around them. Will like have a political position, but they'll see other people around them have a different position, and they'll kind of like wiggle their way out of it to get closer to the group. And I'm, you say you don't understand why people are so disagreeable about me. I have argued with a ton of people on the left, sometimes on stuff that's actually pretty minor too. Like not even, I've gotten into disagreements about stuff that I wouldn't even consider that consequential, but I like arguing. I think arguing is fun. It's a good way to find out where people stand. So I don't take it that personally, but I think a lot of people see stuff like that as a really personal expression of their like immediate social and moral worth, And that leads to them over investing in stuff and like shifting out of positions they might otherwise hold. And that's always kind of bothered me. I think that not an overcommitment, because that implies there's something wrong with it. A strong commitment to your positions, or like being bullheaded, is considered like an autistic trait, I'm pretty sure. So I think that carries through. Either way, it doesn't affect me that much, mostly, I think, because I really like public speaking. So getting good at that has helped me with the more like social elements of being autistic.
Well, I also think something that people often get offended by, and this is something that's hard for me in dealing with people, because I am a person of reason. You want to get emotional, keep that in your personal life. Keep that to your interpersonal relationships. People's feelings regarding policy, like how it makes people feel, is irrelevant to me. I don't care. I don't care about in my personal life. Yes, I very much care about people's feelings. But in terms of what is sound policy, I really don't care about feelings as much as I care about reason and what I care about. And that's something that you are always very good at, I think. And I think that rubs people the wrong way when you're able to look at something very logically and reasonably, and it isn't necessarily as touchy-feely as people would want you to be about something. And I dig that. Like, I like that about you, man.
That's very kind of you. I'll take the compliment uncritically. I've certainly had my fair share of times where I'm just yelling at chat, but that's very fun. I wouldn't trade that for the world.
No, and you're very, very nice to me. That's the other thing. You're never yelling at me. You're never like, saying
so far so good. We're keeping it going.
Part of it, I think, is age. I do think part of it is age. I'm old enough to be your mother, so I kind of think that there's this, and just different things. Like, we're not necessarily on the same generation. So I don't know. I mean, I think that you handle me with kid gloves. Like, maybe you're
you're just fun to talk to. You're agreeable. You're both agreeable. I enjoy talking to you. A lot of it is also like a poisoning the well kind of thing, because people who are, I don't want to say in my generation, but I guess like people who are younger or like around my age, there's a lot of like overlapping and interlocking social expectations that lead a lot of them to have a negative opinion of me before interacting with me. So when they do interact with me, the well is already poisoned. As a consequence of that, it's like pretty much guaranteed to go negative, no matter how the conversation would have turned out otherwise. So in the absence of any like initial well poisoning, I'd like to think, I think I could get along with people pretty well for the most part.
I still find it bizarre that people and they take it personal. And that's the thing. People make it personal. It's not personal. I can say I don't agree with this take and not necessarily say I hate you and think you're trash. Whatever the case may be. And the last thing I really wanted to ask you, and this is also, it's political, but not topical. What would your thoughts be about the idea of a PAC that sole purpose is calling out corruption?
I have no idea how that PAC could ever keep itself from becoming corrupt over time. Or like making preferences with regards to what kinds of corruption it goes after. Like, that would be really difficult in the long run, right?
No, I think it's actually quite doable.
Oh?
This is a brainchild and something that I'm actually working on, and have put together some really impressive people that basically the goal is to fight back against groups like AIPAC and DMFI. Progressive people that run are not just fighting against the other campaign, right? We're fighting against the PACs. And I sat around this for the past couple of years and have really started thinking it through. And there are no PACs that basically counterbalance. So we're always fighting like 2-to-1, and it's very frustrating. And so there's a PAC that's going to be coming around called Citizens Against Corruption, the CAC PAC. And the CAC PAC is going to be calling out the most filthy and corrupt people in Congress based on facts. This isn't personal. This has nothing to do with their personal lives. This is actual based on where they, whether it's insider trading, whatever, where they get their money from, like just really making it clear for people to see. And going into 24, CAC PAC will be calling out the most filthy people that have viable challengers. And it'll basically act as a counterbalance to AIPAC. And that's basically what I'm putting together to do. And my ask for you is that something you might be willing to help us fundraise for?
Oh, I would genuinely, the genuine answer is that I would have to spend a ton of time discussing details and thinking about it. The immediate answer is that I'm always principally in favor of anti-corruption.
Right. Okay. All right, good. But you would be open to a nice presentation by people that are like running this.
Oh, sure. Though I have to forewarn, I almost always decline to get involved in projects because my experience is that they almost always go up in flames, no matter who's involved or for what reason. So my personal experience,
I agree on that,
trends me away from stuff like that. Nonetheless, I'm always open to talk about it.
Yeah, and one of the big problems that I've seen, especially with groups like, Justice Dems and Our Revolution and Brand New Congress, what ends up happening very often is that people are not very strategic in terms of how they go about trying to elicit that change. They spread themselves too thin. They don't realize, how do you say, bright eyes, big stomach?
Yeah, big eyes, small stomach.
Yes.
That's you.
Well, I'm trying not to be.
Yeah.
But that is a lesson that must be learned. And it's not personal. When Jen ran for Congress, I knew that there were people in that room that stood out as candidates more so than others did. And it just so happens that two of those people who stood out were Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman. I happen to know that being in that presence, that you can feel that energy. You know what I mean? You get a sense of who is actually capable of doing this, because it is not for the faint of heart in any way. But our system is so broken at this point. I don't know if it's broken beyond repair. Maybe it is. But if we are going to fix it, I think it's going to require a lot of checking egos at the door and realizing that this is not for everybody. And for those that it is right for, that you have to be very strategic about how you want to go after it. Because if you are not, as we've seen over the last few years, a lot of people that really were engaged, especially in 2015 and 2016, that bought into what Bernie was saying and what he did. And then you saw a few people get in after the fact. And there's a lot of people who are disillusioned, whether it is with AOC or some others. They just turn away. And not that they won't necessarily vote or engage, but to really be involved in the way that they would probably like to be if things were a little bit more transparent on the level. I think that they would be. And I think having trustworthy people that can manage, like a pack like this, I think could go a long way. But that's obviously the big challenge.
No, it's challenging for sure. That's why it's not been done. And also, it certainly hasn't been done properly, and it most certainly hasn't been done affiliated with me. So that's, an entirely different thing. But yeah, no, this is something that has been in my mind for a while, that I've kind of been like working on and figuring out. But we need all the help we can get, basically. I mean, it's like an uphill battle. It's constantly challenging an incumbent, being an insurgent campaign. We have, there's so many things against us, and I'm just sick of it. So it's just about leveling the playing field.
Vaush, before you go, do you want the trifecta? Do you have any cute ladies in your audience that maybe would like to hear from Mr. Bill Clinton?
Nobody wants to hear from Bill Clinton. Do you want to hear from Bill Clinton?
I'm very sorry, but the average member of my audience was not alive when Bill Clinton was president. It would be entirely missed.
I have to say, that's even better. That's exactly what I want to hear.
He likes those youngins. It's so gross. It's so gross. It's so gross.
Dude, an entire committed 20-minute gooner pedo neolib Clinton impression.
No, it's gross.
Vaush, I just want to come on here and say that, listen, the more people you have in your audience, the more likely that there's going to be somebody who's going to be desperate enough to, accept my advances. So I just want to let everybody know who's out there that I was, in fact, president of the United States for 2 years, and I was not impeached in the Senate, only in the House. I have that distinction. It only happened to me once. It happened to, Trump twice, so I got that on him. But I want you all to know that if you have any intention of changing this system to making it so that schmucks like me can't get super rich off of the corrupt and get, off the super corrupt system that we have right now, I can assure you, you are going to fail. And the reason I know you're going to fail is because the Clinton Foundation is still standing. Isn't that amazing? After all these years, we're still able to convince a bunch of suckers out there to give us their money because I have a lifestyle to maintain. And while I may not be going to private islands anymore, I'm still getting around and going to a lot of fancy places.
We know you've been to the island. Go away. I know you've been to the island.
I will not
painting of you has at least
that issue. But Vaush, please give my message to all those young ladies out there. Remember, I'll take a 5 or a 6 and, maybe in the teens, somewhere around there. But, let's just keep it honest. I'm pretty desperate at this age. So just want to let you all know that do not fight the system. It's going to stay exactly the same way. Do not mess with my party. And believe me, don't mess with Hillary.
Nobody wants
then I'm
going to
get beat, and I don't want to get beat. So, kind of.
Why can't you keep her in the house? Why can't you keep her? She needs a hook. We need to give her.
Whoa, hold on. That's misogynistic. Okay, she's a girl boss. You can't just keep her in.
I would say to anybody who had any relationship with her that was in the vicinity that could possibly lock her in a room.
Why do you think I'm here right now? I'm only here to remind people.
You're right. It was misogynistic, but you know what? Really, she's just got to go.
Well, listen. Every time Hillary goes on national TV and likes to remind people
about
how they have to deprogram, it's not working.
That's enough, Bill. He's nowhere near as funny as Trump or loving as Bernie. He doesn't have either of those. Of those critical values.
Gross. He's lechy. Well, Bernie's the only one that doesn't make me feel like I want to move over when he puts that, when he gets
Trump is at least very funny.
Yeah, but I wouldn't want to be standing next to him. He grabs him by the pussy. You know what I mean?
No, you wouldn't want to be next to him. Certainly not as a woman. With Bill Clinton's resounding anti-endorsement in mind, I'm absolutely open to talking about it in the future. But in the meantime, I have to spend 3 hours explaining to my chat how the Palestinians are doomed.
Oh, go ahead. Go chat about the Palestinians. They're not doing well. We had somebody questioning your numbers.
My numbers.
Well, that's what he said. He's we're giving out
of my rear end.
But we had somebody saying it was false information.
In fact, I think I heard it on MSNBC or CNN. It was ridiculous.
Yeah, whatever. All right. Thank you so much for coming on.
It's been a delight to talk to you both.
Always a pleasure, my friend.
Bye.
Have a wonderful day. I'm a bit skeptical about their plans, but good on them. I'm never going to agree offhandedly to a proposal to work together on a project that is pitched to me during a live stream, I mean, my immediate thought is that there's no such thing as an anti-corruption PAC by definition, because the PAC would have to decide what corruption is or isn't, and that itself would be the preferential. I guess it would be there's a bunch of logistical stuff. I'm not a big expert in how PACs operate though. I try to involve myself in as few projects as possible. The reason I work specifically with Progressive Victory is because I get where I fit in that. The Progressive Victory bit is I throw viewers at phone banking and canvassing, and that can't really get fucked up. Worst case scenario, the candidate loses or the project falls through, but it's if I ask you guys to canvass and the candidate loses or project falls through, I don't feel bad that I got you out there canvassing. I got your asses some sun and some grass touching. But if it's let's all donate $50,000 to a PAC and the PAC ends up doing nothing, it's you know what I mean? I always feel weirder about the money stuff than I do the phone banking and canvassing stuff, because those are valuable in and of themselves, and the same can't be said of donations. So it's it's a detail oriented thing.